All right, we might as well get started. I am grateful for Andrew Scanlon for being willing to give us of his time to speak to us today about priorities and strategies for action in environment in crisis, street proven design, and lessons for Palestine, things that we could benefit from as Palestinians. And I know there's a lot of going on with this war and conflict, and people are barely surviving. So maybe they're not thinking about these things for now. But we are going to go ahead and record this, if you don't mind. And that way we can share it widely later for people to benefit from it. So with that in mind, I won't read your biography, Andrew. Maybe you can say a few words about what you do and some background, and then proceed.
Thank you, Professor Kumsia. Good morning, everybody. I'm in Ireland at the moment, and Andrew Scanlon is my name. I have 7 slides for us today, but first I will say a few words. I'm a geologist. I'm also a GIS analyst, and I've been working for 25 years on environment work. We know very well in Ireland the story in Palestine. We know even this morning, as Professor has mentioned, the urgency and the reality also in Lebanon and in the region of conflict. And I send all my prayers and best wishes for that. But I think it is sometimes in war and in conflict good if we can have a few moments to discuss strategy. And that's what I'm going to share. I will be about 20 minutes, and I will give you some of my experience. I'm also, as an Irish person, not unfamiliar with conflict, and I am a child of the Irish conflict in Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, where we had a peace process only 1998. So 25, 26 years back. And it's an ongoing process. And I know it's very difficult for you in Palestine at the moment, but it's worth thinking about that. And some of my experience in my life that I have been working comes from the Irish experience. And we also will welcome Professor Kumsia to Ireland in a couple of weeks. Let me share my screen. I will be speaking in English. Apologies for my Arabic. And I should let you know that I have started learning Arabic. I'm at the moment working with nature experts, so global alliance, but based and focused on the war in Ukraine. And this is a good reminder for you all to think about other conflicts and what lessons can we learn from other conflicts: Sudan, East Congo, Venezuela, the FARC in Colombia, Iraq, the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War, Kuwait, and their environmental action on environment assessment from the aggression of Iraq going back to the 90s. We can actually follow this story of action on environment in crisis for quite some decades. And with nature experts in Ukraine at the moment, which, as you know, in Palestine, the situation in Ukraine, very much where the aggressor is the bad guy, in this case, the Russian state, and then Ukraine in the Western world, at least, and in the United Nations system, Ukraine is seen as the victim. We do not see the same thing in Palestine, as you know. So our work in Ukraine is actually directly relevant for Palestine situation at the moment. And I think I will share some examples from the Ukraine case study. Brave Earth is an alliance. It's a new alliance that we are working on creating and collecting together organizations, individuals, but mostly organizations from conflict locations, not only war, but also disaster. And I think it's really important to, as I speak in English here, to think of the term crisis and think of disaster and conflict very closely connected in terms of response. What will you act? What will you do? Because it's so easy to lose hope and to be stuck in paralysis. And I think that's really key to mention in terms of lessons learned, that action and not being paralyzed is key. But what action? Because you do not want to just be busy, be active, but strategically working on the wrong things. And here you see the philosophy of do the hardest parts first. And that's a personal and a professional philosophy that I've developed with colleagues over many years. And you also see in this slide, the opening slide, a GIS map, Geographic Information Sciences and Systems, GIS. And you see the word brave. And I'd just like to say quickly that courage, and you have that in Palestine, as you know, courage and being brave is not just some fancy idea from the United Nations that has no meaning. Actually, it's still, even in crisis, one of the most important concepts that we have, because courage is a decision. Do the hardest parts first is more technical. And now we're just going to talk quickly about what are those hardest parts. First lesson learned. Yes, strategies, but actually practical action. We see that from our work, or the work that I have done. In my CV very quickly would be a highlight for the work in Palestine at the moment is 10 years with the UN Environment Programme, the early days of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, right up to the setup of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, these are global agreements, but I was specifically working in the conflicts and disasters branch of the UNEP. UNEP is part of the UN family, agencies, funds, programs, including those that you're familiar with, like UNRWA, but also UNDP, UNICEF, UNHCR, and many others. The Security Council, we won't speak about that too much today, and the UN General Assembly. So I have that background strategically, globally, at that level of the UN system, but specifically in the conflicts and disasters branch. I'm a practical person, however. I'm from a local community in Ireland. I'm a scientist, specifically an earth scientist, geologist, and I have been working with protected areas, nature, biodiversity, MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, and then new jargon for everybody, the SDGs, 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Number 17 is cross-cutting. And I still see in 30% of the world today where we have conflict and serious fragility, instability, and disaster, so many gaps. And the response is clear. It's practical action, because it's not next 2030 or 2050, 5 years from now, or 25 years from now, but actually today and this week, what should we do? That's why practical action is key. Building a place-based program, and the importance of place and the science of where predominates. And that means Wadi Gaza or Carpathian National Park. In Ireland, where I live, Wicklow Mountains National Park, Yellowstone in America, Machu Picchu in South America. Places really do matter. And in those places, what we do, we can discuss more, but practical action strategically can really give you solutions. Professor Comsia, can I just make sure that I'm being heard clearly?
Yes, it's very clear. Thank you.
Clear.
Loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Slide 3 of 7. So I'm trying to focus here not to overload you with slides and information. We have the background to this. I am able to talk vertically on the UN level, global agreements, as well as the regional agreements, Middle East, North Africa, MENA, but also the European Union. Ireland is a European Union country. The Brits, the UK, have left the EU project, so now Ireland is the only English-speaking country in Europe that's left. And so I have that experience, the European level agreements or global level agreements. All of them require MRV. You may have heard some people in the call, measuring, reporting, verification. But for me, I am trying to focus before the MRV on the word data. And as a famous American head of CIA once said, in God we trust, but all others should bring data. And in the work that you're doing at the moment, all colleagues on the call, focusing on Palestine, focusing on the urgency of the war, conflict, loss of life, we control what we can control. And one thing that often is lost in the discussions is the geographic information sciences, geographic information systems, measuring, reporting, and that itself is difficult, so how to do that, but also the verification, because as you know, and we're talking about environment here, we are not getting political this morning, but verifying your data and verification, whether it's flora, fauna, environmental damage assessment, collecting environmental damage as Kuwait did in the first Gulf War, and then using that information to take Iraq to court. Seems like a long way from today's discussion, but it's something that defined Kuwait's response in the Gulf War is now, today, and I'm working on this project in Ukraine, an environmental damage assessment of the war, Russian aggression on Ukraine, and analyzing that with informatics, especially GIS, measuring, reporting, and third-party verifying. The third-party verification in the case of Kuwait and in the case of Ukraine are international organizations, partners, independent and UN endorsed or UN approved, following protocols and methodologies that are recognized. So whether that's soil or CO2 emissions from war or GHG, greenhouse gas emissions from war, the impacts on water, biodiversity, a lot trickier to measure, can be done. Flora, fauna, not only flora, fauna, of course, but also ecosystems. And so we come back to place, the importance of place, and not biting off more than you can chew, but picking some key areas, both for flora and for fauna, and integrating that as ecosystem biodiversity, ecosystem locations. We are definitely, for Palestine and for nature, talking about environment here, trying to stay focused on that, because ultimately we learn from other conflicts that those are globally recognized terms that, in this case, even Israel has expertise on: biodiversity, flora, fauna, and commitments made under the climate, land, and biodiversity agreements. In terms of analytics, informatics, measuring, and these are also well-recognized professional terms. So informatics, analytics is terminology that you can find when you go to universities and when you're looking for partnerships, that those are professional areas that we can get support on globally, though we might be on the ground in Bethlehem or in Jordan, in Amman, or somewhere in south of Lebanon at the moment, in Sur, in Tyre, or in Beirut. And our focus might be on the questions and the place on the ground, but the partnership we develop, whether it's in Ireland, in the UN, or globally, really shows the value of information exchange and learning here. The term street-proven design is key, and I'm changing that a little bit here to use the term frontline. I have been working in Middle East, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Ukraine, Congo, South America, and conflicts. I was also in the Great Earthquake in China, 2008, where 400,000 people lost their lives, and there was 4 million homeless, and probably over $1 trillion of damage. So what do you do in our context in Bethlehem University? We're looking at in situ and ex situ conservation focus. The proven design, this really works, is to do the hardest parts first. And the conservation rationale is really important. It's linking these three things, I think, in terms of the hardest parts, is the SDGs, of course, but specific actions on that in your strategy. And I know you have a strategy, but we need to do more work on that. The Rio conventions, and those are very clear. The Land Convention, in my opinion, the most important. And then you've got CBD, the Biodiversity Convention, and CCC, the Convention on Climate Change. Little emphasized, but key, is the chemical conventions as well. And the chemical conventions you might not think about too much, but if you link chemicals, Stockholm Convention, Rotterdam, lead, L-E-A-D, and these silent or very poorly understood conventions, you will find that they're directly relevant to in situ and ex situ nature conservation as well, and that they're very smart, measurable, achievable, resourced conventions that are a great opportunity for young and not so young scientists, citizens, to get involved in environment work through a chemicals lens. It's also something that the regional partners, including the EU and others, recognize technically. Linking biodiversity, climate, land, and the chemical conventions is key. You can then tap into familiar processes that even the State of Israel has recognized, has signed up for. And some of the scientists that are leading these global processes are from universities in Israel. So those global processes, procedures, in terms of national frameworks and action plans, something that you will find very easy, very quick wins in terms of strategy, but difficult to do the work itself. Let's look more in that. Last bullet point. I know this is difficult, and we made this mistake in Ireland, the blame game. We blamed the British Empire for the damage they did to our country for 800 years. And as a result, we were stuck and paralyzed in the blame game. Instead of finding a roadmap to the future for us, we were stuck in the past. And this is, I know, difficult, but I put it there because I think it's important. Who are we now, and what's the opportunity for collaboration? There is an Alliance for Peace and Reconciliation. Avoid the blame game. You have a hub for fragile states, collaboration with the UN agencies and the World Bank, stepping away from the conversation around UNRWA for the moment. The grassroots networks of similar centers for biodiversity, sustainability in other conflict locations and disaster locations. I highlight disasters because that opens the door to collaboration in places like China as well. Partnerships, resource mobilization together we are all spending way too much time on resource mobilization and actually partnerships in resource mobilization, working much more closely together and sharing the work that we're doing on resource mobilization between other fragile locations is really key and a huge improvement in efficiency and effectiveness. UN agencies, funds and programs, and how to connect there. New topic now since 2023 on capital markets, green finance, bonds, war bonds, grassroots action, high net worth individuals, and then what the UN calls major groups. Major groups 1 would be youth, farming. You have also the sectors around climate, the key sectors in climate action for legally binding financed commitments are iron, steel, hydrogen, electricity itself, and a number of other areas that are well funded. Benchmarking, so review your program against tried, tested, street proven template. Examples be Nature Iraq, China, as I mentioned, Ukraine, environmental damage assessment, the UN Hub for Fragile States, the Rio Conventions Network, chemical conventions. The best practice is to do an environment damage assessment. This is a really important slide, so I will walk through it quickly. And this is the best practice on the left. This is a quick suggestion for Palestine on the right. And the first bullet point in the EDA, the Environment Damage Assessment, is to have a high-level panel, whether it's and we're talking about biodiversity, SDGs, conservation here. We're trying to stay apolitical. You've got to start with a reparations concept. So what has been done, how that can be used, what has been done in terms of environmental damage, how that can be calculated, measured, and at some point put forward in terms of recovery, restoration, and a payment associated with that, not necessarily financial. You've got to have a strong science and technical panel to protect you from any attacks from your EDA, your environment damage assessment. You've got to be good on admin, and that's where an administrative panel should be separate from a science and technical panel. You have to think capability, so field operations, small botanical garden activities, so this last couple of weeks, there's been the olive harvest going on in Bethlehem, and that's all highly relevant, how you're getting moving, getting active on the ground with projects. Because that capability and operations and the expertise around capability and operations is always going to be attractive in terms of storytelling, but also in terms of learning and developing. R&D, that means research and development. So your capability, your field projects should also be developing an element of R&D. Again, it's attractive and it's genuinely useful as well in terms of gaining attention and support. Last bullet point, you actually need to elevate, to raise comms, communications to the level of a director level in your work. And whatever that means in your own organizational diagram, we can discuss. But communications is not just at the end of an activity where you share information about it. It's actually should be led as a senior level team, senior level place in your organizational diagram. It's so important to win the communications argument. Communications is not just about marketing and social media. It's internal, external, knowledge management, advocacy, outreach, and teaching and training as well. For Nature Palestine, ethos is key, despite the urgency. So this analysis we're doing now, including GIS, being strong on data, making decisions on your work plan, your 5-year strategy. Should it be a 2030 strategy? Probably yes, even that's a good comms decision. Then prioritize and have early actions, even the olive harvest and talking about daily activities in the botanic garden or in the nature center there. That's all really important, especially if you show the roadmap. I believe a National Biodiversity Conservation Training Center is key. I believe you need an Earth Labs. You get maximum hyperdata, like remote sensing, professional, university, and commercial linkages, including with the big data organizations globally. And then definitely, you may have this already. Let's talk more about a global university partnership for biodiversity and conservation, which exists, but to be part of that and then to be able to tap into those other universities. Thank you. I'm stopping there because I really wanted to have a chance to get to know everyone. I also wanted to, if there's time, to introduce my friend and colleague, John Coe, working on action on environment in crisis for...
Actually, that might be a good idea to introduce your colleagues, have them say something, supplement anything they want to add. That would be great if they can say something. And then we can ask questions of all of you.
All right. Well, I would like to ask John Coe if all colleagues can first see us and then second can understand our English, then please take a few minutes to listen to John, Baba John, in Pashtun and Persian language, where we have been working. We're still working in Afghanistan. But Baba John is in Australia and is an American landscape architect. Professor Kumsia, I know you are interested in landscape design, especially around the training center.
Yes.
And all colleagues, this is my teacher, John. He's also my friend and has been, as an American, working on landscape design, gardens, visitor centers, training and teaching in some of the most important projects around the world for many years. And please take time to say hello to John. John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Yes, you can probably see by looking at me that I've been around this planet for quite a while. I've had the good fortune to work in 15 different countries. Everything from designing botanic gardens and zoos to designing national parks in 5 different countries. Everything in between. I've worked with Andrew, first of all, in national park work in China, in Chengdu, is where we first met. Later, he convinced me that I could help in Afghanistan, and I made 11 trips to Afghanistan, working really mostly in the high mountains, helping sustainable rural development, helping villages help themselves. A wonderful experience. But the level that Andrew's been talking about, the essential global connections, is something I strongly support but don't understand. It's a different universe for me. But Andrew speaks many languages, and UN is one of them, and international communications is one of them that he's really good at. I guess what I bring to projects is innovation, novel insights, lots of experience, and a great deal of respect for people and landscapes around the world. Andrew just showed a poster that I made working with the United Nations Environment Program in the Central Highlands of Afghanistan, showing how interventions at the Alpine Zone, the rangeland zone, the upper catchment, all these different zones can reduce disaster risk enormously by reducing flooding. It can help the water get into the ground where it moves slowly and is available all year round rather than just during the spring floods, and integrates sustainable, ecologically based agriculture while supporting revegetation, while supporting biodiversity, while healing the land and healing the people. So I guess one of my main interests is bringing all of these things together in images, but more importantly in strategies and in action plans. And that, I don't know how that may help or not, the work you're doing, but this is a fairly recent example of my work.
Thank you, John. And less is more, but really, when we talk about the importance of place, that's more John's side of things. 65 years of project. We are reminded of also the science of where. And the science of where is a good term to try to remember about strategies, projects. Everyone's talking about projects, but also today and this morning, and the importance of key resource being human resource, people. And that's what we wanted to bring to this meeting. There is lots of new words, lots of jargon. It is part of our job to learn jargon, but we also need to stay focused on a big picture. So what I'd like to do in the next stage is to have some Q&A, questions and answers. Again, apologies for our Arabic, but I feel in this case that we are listening to you and we would like to know more about how you see the situation with your center, with your work, and some suggestions, questions. The door is open, and please, over to you in Bethlehem and wherever you may be.
Well, maybe I will start. Thank you for John for coming also, because actually I need to contact you and have you help us also in garden designs and stuff like that. So I may impose on you with some advice. I will need to get your email from Andrew and contact you separately. But one of the challenges which you can understand from working in many developing countries of the global south, of course, is the bureaucracy of the government and the sometimes even corruption of the government. So I'm wondering if you have any advice to us who want to preserve the environment, how we might communicate better or how we might solve this issue. Either of you can take this.
Let me take that, Mazine. It's definitely a headache, but you can navigate it. And the best way to navigate bureaucracy is to understand it. And that's something that we have 8 on the call today. We don't all need to be good at navigating bureaucracy, but somebody needs to be in the team. And I've been working as a scientist and as a restoration worker for 25 years, even in Ireland, here in our national park, Wicklow Mountains National Park, in our National Botanical Garden, Irish Government and Botanical Garden, Biodiversity Centre, Museum for Natural History. We have bureaucracy too. It's not any different in Palestinian Authority. I think it's not too difficult to navigate it. In fact, let's discuss, but you need somebody in the team, director level, or if it's a panel of friends and colleagues, at least in that panel you have somebody who knows partnerships, knows how to navigate policy and advocacy. And in Palestine, we've been having a discussion by email this week. Who's leading for Palestine on climate, biodiversity, land, chemicals? I have a pretty good idea of the background there. And in my view, those people are always looking for good stories, or if you can explain to them how to navigate the portfolio, they will easily see that they are losing opportunities because they are not mobilizing Palestinian organizations to apply for resources and to open the door for more. We have even a discussion, let's have that discussion again, how countries, other countries in conflict and in disaster are accessing significant resources and replenishing those resources each 4 years, significant level. And something we have that experience. And there are also organizations helping you with that. But those organizations, as it seems to be the case, is it the case that have not been so helpful to you in the past? I'd like to help more with that. Over.
Thank you. John, you want to add something to that from your experience? John?
I would say that often bureaucrats are afraid to take risks, or they don't understand what's possible. They only understand what's been done before. And so one thing we've done that's had success is to promise very little, but to deliver very much. So we get the door open by providing a service that in their limited vision they want, and then use that opportunity to expand their vision to future opportunities. So it doesn't always work, but it has worked sometimes. Over.
Thanks. Okay, any of the other people attending, the other people can introduce themselves. يا جماعة إذا بتقدروا عرفوا على حالكم واسألوا أسئلة. بنان مثلا، محمد. I guess it was all crystal clear.
We say in Ireland, if there's no questions, you understood everything or nothing. But I would be really grateful if colleagues Rami and Mohammed Al-Batat and Nasi, if you could say quick hello, hi, and what are you doing, so that we have a better idea of your team, if you don't mind.
Hi, I can say hi. Thank you so much for the presentation and sharing your knowledge and experience. We highly appreciate it. My name is Rami Abu Saad. I work with Dr. Mazen Institute as the Deputy Director for Administration Section. So my area of focus is admin work, finance, operations, and fundraising. Less work on scientific components, but I have to deal with. So thank you again, and glad to.
Yeah, maybe you guys can give us some ideas about fundraising. How do we get money?
Rani, nice to meet you. And I have that in my action roadmap, that we often talk about the STAP, the science and technical experts in the panel. And my experience from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from the UN Hub for Fragile States, and from this conflicts and disasters is the admin guys. You are a secret weapon, and not only tedious, I don't know how to translate in Arabic tedious, but also meticulous work on admin is something you can control. For example, Bob, good question. He said there is ecocide in Palestine. There is genocide in Palestine. But actually, Rani, you do what you can do. And if you can do good admin, you can control that. Even the Irish government or the European Union, who wants to support you, needs meticulous admin. So you are one of the key people, Rani.
Thank you so much. Yeah, true.
I agree.
The different roles complement each other. And yeah, you're right. So,
Okay. Muhammad Al-Battat or Banan Sheikh, you want to say something?
Nasih Shaheen.
Hi everybody, Salamat. I am Banan Sheikh. I am a botanist working as a volunteer and sometimes subcontract with the museum in Bethlehem with Dr. Magar Qumsiye. We had some articles, we published some articles about the biodiversity in the West Bank, plant biodiversity in the West Bank. Thank you, Andrew and Bob.
I look forward to meeting you soon. Salamat.
Inshallah. You are learning Arabic, so you know what, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you.
نعم. ورجينا وجهك يا بنان، حط الفيديو.
ماشي. الفيديو لحظة شوي.
See him to show us his face.
لحظة شوي.
I have some experience in Jordan with botanical team, including from the Royal Botanical Garden with Basma, Princess Basma, and similar in Rashidiyya in Lebanon, in south of Lebanon. We have been working a number of years. My focus is on the environment side, but you have very close to you good contacts. I'm sure Professor Qumsiya also has these next networks, but we should follow up now urgently.
Cool.
Where in Jordan?
Royal Botanical Garden is just north of Amman on the road to Ajloun.
I see.
Dibin. Do you know Dibin?
Yes, I know the Dibin, yes. The nature reserve.
Yes, and south of Dibin you have the new botanical garden for Jordan. New project.
I see.
When did they start that project, Andrew?
They started that project with support from Peter Wise Jackson, who's the head of the Global Botanical Gardens Institute, in 2011 conceptually. They broke ground in 2019, and now actively they are developing the collections and teaching, training, and they have also learned to call that ex situ garden sustainability center, biodiversity center, restoration botany center. So not traditional botanical garden from the past, but the new idea for botanical gardens for the future, which is about the SDGs. And I think for Bethlehem, with the war, you also can see the aspect of ex situ conservation for recovery after the war.
So we can actually stop the recording. I don't know who's recording. Probably Sarah is recording, or but anyway, we're close to the time, and we're working on this proposal. We're just submitting today related to education, early childhood education program. So deadline is today, so I really have to
Sure.
get going on that.